Alright, here we go. Hey RV family, keep it tight. My name is Jay Morris and welcome back to the Metal Tempest. You'll notice that a lot is different, and you'll probably notice a couple things right off the bat. Number one, the lighting is better. I am illuminated like a shining radiant virtue of Saint Mary. And the next thing is you will notice that I'm crisp as a fucking Pringle right now because I am using my professional mic that I use for like voice acting and voiceover work. And you'll probably also realize that we have a new backdrop. I had recently wanted to start using my regular mic to improve the audio, and I had also wanted to have better lighting for my videos, and my normal setup, which you will see over there, the old Jay Morris setup, which is always going to be in the backdrop, it's going to be omnipresent, don't worry. The lighting sometimes wouldn't reach over there properly, or the window would get in the way of it, or just in general, sometimes I would have to compromise audio quality because the place where I ran my mic from just wouldn't reach that far back because it doesn't seem like that much of a distance, but it genuinely is, and it's a Blue Yeti. It has a pretty fucking long cord. So I decided that from now on, my videos are going to be filmed right around my computer with my microphone, with my webcam, in a nice backdrop. We have some vinyls, we have the guitar, the signature guitar from like 2020. Kudos to you if you remember when that was in my videos. The Jay Morris setup, the Architect's poster, which is just, that's been there for like, God, like 5 or 6 years at this point. But overall, the plan is I have more room to move around, I have more room to put images, and I just overall think it's going to be a great change. So let me know what you guys think of the new video quality and the audio quality, because I genuinely do think it's going to be a massive improvement and allow me to make content more efficiently and quickly with better quality overall for you guys. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. So today I'm going to be doing my continuous ongoing series, albums I liked, or in this case, the best albums from the prior month. Basically, in a sort of roundup in no particular order, I give you guys recommendations and shout out and do little mini reviews of my favorite records from the prior month for you guys to check out, both from well-known bands that may have slipped through the cracks, as well as underground bands that I want to put on your guys' radar. All of the links to the Bandcamps or the YouTube links, depending, are going to be down in the description box below. And go ahead and let me know what your guys' favorite records from the prior month is as well. Did you have any albums that just started the year off right for you? Let me know down in the comment section below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get into it. This was obviously a given, but the first album that I want to shout out is the 11th studio-length album by Obituary, Dying of Everything. So generally speaking, in the realm of death metal, Obituary is one of the greats. They are one of the classics. They are one of the essentials. And if you hear bands from the 80s brought up like Possessed or Death or Autopsy, you are also going to hear a band like Obituary brought up into the circle. It's been a decent chunk of time since we got an Obituary record. Back in 2017 was the last time we got a studio-length record, and it's not really uncommon for this band to have gaps between material or hiatuses or just larger gaps between their studio records. But the reason that I think this record is so special compared to maybe a Cannibal Corpse record is Obituary takes an approach to death metal, and they always have, where they focus a lot more on the initial thrash metal influence that you saw in death metal. And that means that they have tons of grooves, and they make their material in such a way where it is very hooky, and you get genuine choruses. And I think one thing that a lot of modern bands that try to have this Renaissance era where they revive old school death metal, one thing they miss out on is they focus so heavily on the brutality and not enough on the songwriting. And across this record, not only is it a very precisely produced record, but the guitar riffs and the vocals are just ferocious, but they also have a level of intelligibility that I do enjoy. I think that they have a smart way of writing riffs and constructing these songs that pay homage to that older style that they came from and that they pretty much built the foundation of with the greats. And that's one thing I love to hear in modern death metal, is that homage to old school death metal of thrash influence, because a lot of the early bands that came from the genre, especially bands like Death, were very much inspired by the speed metal and thrash metal from the late 70s and the early 80s, these fast and frantic electrifying riffs. And across this record, it really makes me happy that they are returning to their roots and just having a fast-paced, heavy death metal style. It's not really reinventing the wheel or doing anything that you haven't heard from Obituary in the past, and I don't think it's going to turn any haters into believers, but similar to Cannibal Corpse, I think that they scratch a certain itch that you don't see scratched often from modern bands that miss the mark. And it doesn't overstay its welcome either, which is always awesome. It's an experience for death metal fans that I think is very worthwhile this year. Okay, the next record that I want to shout out is an underground record that I literally could not find barely any information over, but I want to pass it by you. That being Abyssal Worm's record, Kingdom of Decadence. Now, as far as I know, this might be a solo project, it might be a multi-project, but this is a debut EP, and it gets in and out before it really has much time to get overly cumbersome. This is a death grind and a war metal record a la Revenge, but imagine if Revenge just took out all of their black metal influence and made it solely death metal, intensity, grinding, buzzsaw riffs, just a non-stop style that grinds you to bits. I will say that my one critique of this record, and I will warn people going into it, that I think it will pose an issue for some people. The vocals definitely could have been turned up in the mix. They don't sound like they have much on them, and it's not in like the raw death metal way of they're not really compressed or equalized and they're just guttural and in your face, as opposed to swallowing the mix or being anything imposing to sort of add to the chaos. The vocals are like this accompaniment to the instrumentation. And a lot of times with good war metal records, whether they're death metal or black metal inspired, I like to hear standout vocals that sort of dominate the mix and sit amongst the instrumentation, but there were a lot of points across this record that I thought the vocals just kind of got drowned out by the chaos of everything, and definitely could have been higher in the mix. But for a debut, I really did enjoy this, and it's kind of just stuck out in my mind. Next up, I want to shout out Ahab's record, The Coral Tombs, this German funeral doom metal band that has pretty much been one of the consistently most praised bands in the entire genre. Anytime they release a record, it's a cause for celebration, and I think that's for good reason, because if you compare them to a band like Mournful Congregation or even a Bell Witch, those two bands have a slow, murky style that pretty much can sometimes border on a little one-dimensional, a little bit one-note. And if you're wanting to step outside of the confinements of funeral doom metal, you're probably not going to get much diversity or musical complexity or texture to their material. But the thing that Ahab has consistently done across their records, and I think it's the reason they kind of broke into the funeral doom metal mainstream and metal mainstream in a sense, is the complexity that they put into their music. It's very intelligent, it's very progressive, and they aren't afraid to go into cleaner passages, more progressive rock-inspired passages, progressive metal-inspired passages, and just classic doom metal passages. They don't just sit in one lane for long, and they allow these tracks to breathe on their own. And that's the thing that I appreciate a lot from a funeral doom metal band that is not afraid to take risks, because I think the thing that people are drawn to with Ahab is that progressivism within their own style. None of these tracks stay in a particular position for too long, and yes, of course, you get the low, downtrodden, depressive riffs that just ring out like church bells, but the clean vocals and the general production and the way that a lot of these tracks are very multifaceted breaks up the monotony that would have happened if it was just an average funeral doom metal band that just sticks to one specific thing the entire way through for like an hour. That can get very, very mind-numbing fast, but luckily Ahab just continues to make consistently good funeral doom metal records with a ton of depth and a ton of dimension to them. Definitely check it out if you missed it. Imperium Decadence, if I am pronouncing that correctly. Imperium Decadence? Decadence? I'm not entirely sure. Have literally come out with probably my favorite record of this year thus far with the album Into Sorrow Evermore. These guys have been at it since I believe 2004 when I was looking them up, and they're a two-piece German atmospheric black metal duo. And I am a sucker for atmosphere in music. I've said it many times that that is one of my biggest draws when it comes to a ton of metal music. Anytime atmosphere is put into material, I tend to like it more. I think it adds a lot more depth to instrumentation and vocals, and I just love when an album is able to create and evoke that feeling. And God, if this record does not do that in spades, I don't know what will. I pass through a lot of atmospheric black metal because it's a genre that I frequent quite often, so I am a little critical of bands that just sound like they're doing the same thing as everyone else. And I can be a little hypercritical when it comes to judging records of that genre. That's why I rarely review it unless it's an album that really just sticks out to me. And this is one of those albums. If I were to give it a solo review, I probably would have given it like a 9 out of 10. the sorrow, pun unintended, of this record is palpable. They put it in such a palatable way that the drum work is so crisp, the guitar work is so frigid, but everything in this mix is not mechanical. It still sounds very organic. It still sounds very full and rich and lively, but it's also very audible. And sometimes I don't want just a raw and nothing else experience from an atmospheric black metal band. And I do like these bands that sometimes turn up the intensity, but also turn up the production to make everything more audible, to make everything more full in the mix. And this does have a very full mix. I am adoring the sound of this record, and I don't want to spoil too much about it because I want you guys to check it out yourself if you missed it. And if you're a fan of bands like Tra or Kekta Rock, or even if you like Paysage d'Hiver, but maybe the production wasn't to your liking, check this record out. It is just dense, it's impenetrable, and it has a certain level of sadness in the riffs that a lot of bands try to land the punch on, but just fail to. So definitely check it out if that's up your alley. Don't want to spend too long on this record because I think that a lot of people are going to find it a little basic, but it has been one I have been enjoying. That being Massacre's record, The Devil's Awakening. This is just straight up mortician worship, honestly. It's grinding, it's low, it is so slow at points. A band I could also compare it to is, if you are familiar with the horror, pain, death, gore signed band Ruin that had that compilation Plague Transmissions like back in the 2010s. It's very that. It's just, there's nothing touched up about it. It's gruesome, it's blood-caked, it just tries to go for the jugular. It doesn't pull any punches. If you want something progressive or multi-layered or something, you're probably not going to get it here, but I still think it's a fun time. And honestly, another record similar to Obituary that I have to shout out just because it was good would be Sky Void of Stars by Katatonia, their 12th studio-length album. Honestly, I am not the biggest Katatonia fan a lot of times. I think that they can get a little bit campy and a little too overly ambitious and overzealous for thinking how campy they are. And a lot of times their mixture of gothic and progressive metal, a la like Bargain Bin Opeth, just isn't particularly my thing. But I was pretty impressed by the progressions on this record. I do like the slower sections that are reminiscent of kind of like a Dream Theater or even a Porcupine Tree, very pretty atmosphere, and a very lavish mix that brings everything up to this shimmering effect, which I know some people don't like that, but for me, when I hear a progressive metal or rock album that isn't afraid to make a very beautiful and shimmering, glimmering sort of production, I actually do really appreciate that because I think it adds to the complexity of the mix. Overall, the vocals still are a little campy for my liking, but I do like that their more progressive metal and progressive rock isms are coming out more on this record as opposed to their older death metal stylings and their gothic metal stylings, because I think their weakest material in the past was those albums when they tried to get ambitious with their influences in that way. It just wasn't my cup of tea, but I actually really did find myself impressed by this record. Okay, I'm gonna have to look at the name of this. There is a black metal record from a project called Hostel, and I'm about to butcher, I believe, I'm gonna butcher this language. Longue Leve Døden. I know that's wrong. They are a multi-country supergroup of sorts, black metal from the Scandinavian region. It's a supergroup made up of members of other bands, namely Kvarforth of the band Shining, the really popular depressive suicidal black metal band Shining, is on the vocals here. And that is the standout thing. The instrumentation overall, it's not blowing me away in the sense of it is sitting shoulder to shoulder with some more bare minimum sort of Scandinavian black metal bands, so I'm not super like blown away by that, but the vocals are the thing that keeps me coming back to this record. Because I think the interesting thing with getting a vocalist that performs in depressive suicidal black metal, that subgenre, which is notorious for very throaty, shouty, tortured vocals, and then putting that vocal style on a faster paced, more original and traditional black metal take, unlike the Norwegian and Sweden tradition, I think that it comes out really cool because it's not as slow paced, but it still has that throaty and tortured nature, and I think you don't hear that a lot in black metal that is playing in this style, considering a lot of bands just choose to go for the shriek approach and nothing else. Overall, it does have good production. I do think that the instrumentation could have been a little more technical, a little more complex, but the vocals and the percussion are definitely the standouts across this record. And that wraps it up for my favorite records of the last month. What were your favorite records, and what were your thoughts of the ones on this list? Let me know down in the comment section below. Once again, all of these are going to be linked in the description box below if you want to check them out. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is, my name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.